I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on developing rapport to improve trust and success. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Rapport is a basic sense of trust, connection, and understanding. It is an essential first step in all relationships, our personal relationships. When you met your boss, when you met your friend, when you met your partner, the first thing you had to do was develop some level of rapport to start moving toward trust. Professionally, we need to develop trust and develop rapport, and that's true in all professions. If you're going to convince somebody to hire your marketing firm or hire you as a lawyer or a therapist, they have to trust you. Today, we're going to explore the concepts of projection and transference and how they can alter rapport. Well, that's at the end of the presentation. We'll describe 3 ways to identify and address projection and transference, and discuss how displaying secure attachment behaviors can help develop rapport in the client and in our relationships. So rapport is a sense of safety, connection, and trustworthiness. And thinking about people with whom you have rapport, with whom you have some level of comfort, some level of relationship versus those that you don't. And I can think about people in my neighborhood. I have rapport with some of them, good rapport with some of them. Some of them I don't know from Adam's house cat. I mean, we wave to each other, but that's about it. Developing rapport means meeting the person where they are, mentally, physically, emotionally, and helping them feel confident that you're there to help them achieve their goals. Now, obviously, this is more true in professional relationships, lawyers, marketing, therapists, doctors, etc. But that's really what we need to do. I want you to think about how a lack of rapport impacts assessment and treatment. If I'm sitting down, and this is a newbie mistake that a lot of clinicians make. They take somebody back for an intake, they sit down, and they get right to the paperwork. Well, I haven't developed rapport yet. Why should I expect that person sitting in front of me to be willing to tell me anything, to trust that I have their best interest in mind? Developing rapport is essential in order to create at least enough of a bridge between you and that other person that they're willing to be moderately open and authentic. And yes, I'm hedging these because if you've done assessments like most of us have, you know that most of the time people don't come in, sit down, and just open themselves up like an open book. They have to develop rapport. They have to believe that you understand where they're coming from. They have to believe that you are safe and trustworthy. It's going to be hard for them to be honest and authentic, be vulnerable, if there's not some level of rapport. Engagement. It's hard to engage people if there's no rapport. If I'm talking at them or using lots of big lofty words and talking over their head or doing something else that blocks engagement where they don't want to connect with me. If we've got rapport, then we've built that bridge. If we don't have rapport, then we're going to have a hard time engaging with each other because we may at best be reaching across a chasm and not be able to connect. And in treatment, it impacts progress. If you get through the assessment and you didn't develop rapport, when you get into treatment is when you really hope people are going to be willing and able to be honest and authentic. And if they don't trust you, if they're afraid to tell you what they're actually thinking, it's going to be hard to make progress. Likewise, they may lie to you about their progress because they may not want to let you down. They may not want to disappoint you. They may need to cover up for something, and they're afraid that you're going to rat them out to their probation officer or something. So rapport is essential, and how people develop rapport varies. As a person, as a clinician, I am very straightforward with people. I'm like, all right, I'm going to ask you to do things. There are certain things that we need you to do in this program. And if you're not willing to do them, you don't feel comfortable doing them, that's okay. Tell me and we'll figure out something else. I can't know what you're not comfortable with unless you tell me. But that opens that door to the person to say, I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm not going to control what happens. We're in this together. Developing rapport is the first step in developing secure attachment. And for many of our clients, in therapy especially, for many of our clients, this may be one of the first healthy, secure relationships that they've ever had. And yes, I know it is a doctor-patient relationship, etc. There's hierarchies, what have you. But this may be one of the first relationships in which they don't have their boundaries violated, in which the person that they are talking to is consistent, attentive, responsive, encouraging, and safe. How liberating is that to be able to go in and feel like, hey, I can be my true self. And even if you disagree with me, you're not going to fire me as a patient. You're not going to abandon me. Rapport allows people to feel safe so they can downregulate and hear what you say. If you don't have rapport with somebody, they're hypervigilant. They're scanning for signs that you're going to reject them or hurt them in some way. If you have rapport, then they can downregulate, get into their wise mind, and maybe hear what you have to say. There are a lot of times I've said things to clients that either they haven't wanted to hear, they haven't been ready to hear, or they flat disagreed with. And that's okay. When there's rapport, the client is able to hear it and go, not so much, or I disagree. And we can have a discussion about it. When we don't have rapport, the person may just get up and walk out and go, you don't get me, forget it. Or they may shut down, or they may feel like an old dysfunctional relationship is repeating itself. We don't want that. So with rapport, the person can get into their wise mind. They don't need to be hypervigilant because they feel safe. So they can actually hear and cognitively process what you say and explore issues in their wise mind and try new things, which is where encouragement comes in. We're going to be there. And a lot of times new skills, we have people rehearse in session. If they don't feel safe, they may feel hesitant about trying out new skills because they're afraid that they're not going to do it right. They're afraid that they're going to fail. Or we may introduce a skill that we want them to try and they're like, no, not doing that. But they're not comfortable enough telling us. There's a lot of ifs. When people are holding back, when they're not being authentic, there's a lot of things that we may not be able to accomplish in therapy. And we can encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and try some of these new things. Yeah, it feels awkward at first trying to communicate assertively or use I statements or whatever you're trying to have them do. Think back to when you were in first-year counseling school. A lot of the stuff that we had to do in scenarios and role plays and other things, it felt awkward. However, our peers and our professors were there to encourage us. And that's what we're doing in clinic. But if a person doesn't trust us, if they feel like they're going to be rejected, abandoned, ridiculed, blah, 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 they're not going to go there, which means they're not going to move forward. They need to be able to have rapport with you so they can be authentic and vulnerable so you can be consistently present with them. If they come in and they have this facade on, everything's fine, yeah, what we're doing is working great, but inside they're going, I'm dying here, doc. We're not going to be able to necessarily notice that. Or, maybe their nonverbals are just screaming, I'm not doing well, but verbally they're saying, yeah, it's good. With rapport, I might be able to gently challenge that and say, you know what? Your words are saying you're doing fine, but your nonverbals are telling me something different. When someone doesn't feel safe. In many cases, especially if they came from chaotic households, they may have become very, very good at hiding some of these things. And if they're hiding it, I can't support them. If I don't know the problem or the weakness or the distress exists, I can't be there to be consistently present and supportive. So we need that rapport so they're willing to come in and say, this is not working, or Doc, I'm really angry at you for this. Okay. Sometimes we do things, suggest things, say things that may cause our clients to feel threatened for a minute. And what they do with that anger is obviously up to them. But the ability to assertively communicate it indicates we've got rapport, and they're not afraid that I am going to bow up and be all nasty because they call me out on something. And rapport allows people to identify their thoughts and needs and effective response strategies. If we don't have rapport, then we can't help them learn how to address these things. Rapport requirements, another one of my mnemonics. It's a new one. Welcome to mnemonic land. S.H.A.R.E. In order to have effective rapport, the person, the client, has to feel safe, heard, assisted, respected, and empowered. Thinking about what would each of these look like in a session with a client or when you meet someone in an intake. How can you help them? What could you do to help them feel safe? Obviously, sitting down, talking to them as a human being, making eye contact, making sure they realize they're not just a number. That's helpful. How your office is decorated can help them feel safer or less safe. Being aware of transference and projection issues and what you may represent to them. A lot of the clients that I worked with early in my career were involuntary. And I represented that very system that was controlling them, that was forcing them to be there. And I had to recognize that, this is what it is. And we would have open conversations at the very beginning. Before we even started the assessment, a lot of times I'd go over confidentiality and what I could and could not promise them. A lot of my clients who were involved with DCFS and with probation and parole, there were things that they needed to process. There were things that they needed to work through that were quite honestly none of their caseworkers' business. What would I need to tell your PO? What would I need to tell your caseworker? And letting them know ahead of time. That helped develop a sense of safety. So they knew that, okay, I can, and I'm not expecting them to trust me the day that they meet me, but I'm laying this groundwork saying, I hear you are being forced to be here. I hear that could feel very threatening. I hear that I don't represent your best friend in the whole world. I represent an oppositional institution. However, you have to be here. So let's talk about what I can and cannot do. We want to make sure they feel heard, and not just the words that they speak, but the meaning of those words. I had a client come to me one time in the assessment, and one of the things, we were a 12-step based program, and one of the things that she was supposed to do was go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And she started out the session by sitting down and telling me, I'm here because I've got to be here, but let me tell you, I'm not doing those meetings. Okie dokie, I hear you. There is something about those meetings that is triggering for you, that is a non-starter for you. Okay, what will you do instead? And, we found an alternative instead of going to 12-step meetings for her. And I didn't probe, what is it about 12-step meetings that, is really bothers you? Didn't have time to do that in the assessment. I acknowledged that there was something about the meetings that was triggering, that was threatening to her, and she wanted an alternative. And that was enough. She felt heard. And so she kind of put down her hackles a little bit and said, okay, I'll complete this. And we continued with the assessment. We want to make sure they feel assisted. And what is that going to look like in a session, whether it's a therapy session or an assessment session? Helping people not feel controlled, not feeling dictated to, but feeling assisted, and here's the key, to moving toward what's important in their rich and meaningful life. And this is another lesson I had to learn the hard way. First job out of college was with felony probation and parole people who had drug offenses. And we were doing substance abuse treatment. And the first couple of months, I tried doing group with them and going through, this is what addiction is. This is why it's bad. This is relapse prevention. And they were falling asleep. They were not engaged. They didn't say much. Well, what does that tell you? What should it have told me right away? It should have told me they didn't feel safe, they didn't feel heard, and they didn't feel assisted. And I talked to my supervisor about it, and eventually I came around to understand that we needed to have mutually agreeable goals. They wanted off papers. They wanted to get off probation. Okay. I wanted them to succeed. However, many of them did not have the goal of stopping using. That was not something they wanted to be told that they had to do. Okay. So what is our mutual goal? For you to get off papers, you need to stay clean for the next 4 months. It was a 16-week program. You need to stay clean for the next 4 months. Okay. That is the goal that the court has set. Now, how can I help you accomplish that? Instead of lecturing at them and talking at them about the harms and the evils of illicit drug use, we started talking about communication. We started talking about the vulnerabilities that cause them to want to use. We start talking about their triggers, started talking about assertive communication and what they could do to manage some of those things that were distressful in their life, knowing that distress motivated drug use. We talked about ways to stay clean in the short term. And I would always emphasize, what you do after you get out of this program is your business. I would love it if you'd stay clean, but that's not, your life is not my life. You can do, you're going to do whatever you want to once you're off papers. But let's talk about how I can support you in making it through the next 16 weeks. Things went so much better once I joined them. Instead of expecting them to join me where I was, the whole anti-drug thing, I joined them where they were, meeting them and identifying them and helping them address some of the fundamental issues that were maintaining their distress. When I did that, not only did they start to feel safer and heard and assisted, but they also felt more respected because I wasn't lecturing at them, which, big mistake. And they felt more empowered because we would make small goals. What can you do this week to improve your sleep? What can you do this week to improve your relationship with your partner? And then they would come back the next week and talk about that. And yes, we would do check-ins on how their substance use or lack of use was going, but that wasn't the central focus of a lot of the groups. And then people started feeling safer talking about triggers and wanting to use and what they were doing. And encouraging your supervisees, new clinicians, to think about what is it that you can do, what is it that you currently do in individuals and in groups that may make people feel unsafe, not heard, unassisted, disrespected, and disempowered. What things might you do? Not saying you're doing them intentionally. Most of us have the best intentions when we go in. We just weren't taught. Okay. And then what can you do to change that? What does your particular population, your groups, or your clients that you're working with, thinking of 2 or 3 maybe. What could you do to help them feel more safe, heard, assisted, respected, and empowered? And heck, it's possible, if appropriate, that the therapist actually asks the client, what could I do? It seems like we're not connecting. What could I do to help you feel more safe, heard, assisted, respected, and empowered? And have an open discussion. Common mistakes that clinicians make that destroy rapport are pigeonholing people. All people with depression should go through this type of treatment. All people with addiction need to follow this recipe for recovery. You can't say that about humans. You just can't. We need to treat each individual as, oh my gosh, an individual, and recognize their unique needs and their unique history, their trauma history, their sociocultural history, their current access to resources, their current strengths, and their current obstacles. Forcing repetition of the same thing. Somebody's gone through treatment before, whether it's depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction, it doesn't matter. They've gone through it before and it didn't work. And now we're asking them, telling them to do the same thing. All right, I want you to start journaling every day. I want you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. Without asking, what have you done in the past that was helpful? So we can build on that. And what have you done in the past that just really didn't work? So we don't do that again. I've told you in many, many other classes, I have never kept a diary. I am not a journal person. I'm a list person. I'm not a journal person. Telling me to journal my feelings at the beginning or end of every day is off-putting. That just makes me go, no, not going to do it. And that would damage rapport. Asking, do you think this would be helpful? I would say no. But then that I wouldn't feel like you were telling me to do something. I would feel like we were cooperating in developing a plan. Repeating the same thing multiple times usually means that whatever that thing isn't quite getting the job done. Having somebody go through substance abuse treatment 2, 3, 4, 14 times. And yes, I've known people who've been through the same program more than 10 times. And to me, that's the definition of insanity, because clearly the program is not addressing something. And usually it's a mental health issue, because they address the substance use issue, they get clean, but that mental health issue is still out there stoking the flames of relapse. And an unwillingness to explore alternatives, which kind of goes with both of the above. If a client wants to look at exploring EMDR or acupuncture, or they want to go to Celebrate Recovery or Rational Recovery meetings instead of 12-step meetings, if I shut down and I say, no, that's not the program, what does that communicate to the client about my willingness to acknowledge them as an individual and recognize their unique needs? For some people in 12-step programs, most of them, maybe not all, most of them say the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting. And for a lot of people who have religious trauma, that's a deal breaker. That's a deal breaker. Holding hands. A lot of places encourage holding hands during the Lord's Prayer, or hugging. For a lot of people, that's a deal breaker. Acknowledging that and saying, okay, this is one way, if that's your issue, this is one way you could handle it if you want to go to 12-step meetings. If you don't, let's look at some alternatives. Tell me what you could do instead. Tell me what you think might work. Voluntary clients are those who have chosen to seek help but still may be fearful and guarded because likely they haven't had a lot of good supportive relationships. Involuntary clients are required to attend the assessment and or treatments and their fate often depends on your report. Excuse me. Criminal justice clients, those who are on probation, on parole, pretrial diversion, and I include mental health courts and drug courts in here. Child welfare, people who are going through a divorce or a custody battle. First responders, impaired professionals like nurses, doctors, therapists, and anybody who is in a DOT safety sensitive position. They drive big trucks, they drive big machinery. They are all of these groups are supervised by somebody who is invested in making sure that they are not actively using or at least not addicted. And you will get a lot of referrals from people, from these agencies with people who have substance abuse and mental health issues. And we need to recognize, why might this person be guarded? What might happen? How could I alter this person's fate? And how does that impact our rapport? With all of my clients, not just my involuntary clients, one of the things I do is I spend the first 50 minutes doing therapy, and then the last 10 minutes, we work together to write the progress note. And we do the SOAP note together. They can see what I've written, and I make it very clear to them from day one. You want to see what I put in the assessment? It's yours. You can read it. You want to see what I put in the note? It's yours. You can read it. There are no surprises. I'm not secretly telling your PO or your caseworker something that I'm not telling you. And that is not usual for a lot of the people we work with. Ultimately, with HIPAA and everything, they do have a right to request to see their records. And most of the time, we have to give them access to them. So even if that's not your normal practice, make sure you're writing your notes in a way that is objective, that is supported by facts, and that is defensible. If they read through it, they're not going to feel attacked. They're not going to feel judged. You know, this person was, I don't like the word resistance, but I see it a lot in notes. Jim Bob was being resistant to treatment. Well, that's not objective. That's subjective. So tell me, as evidenced by, what was Jim Bob doing that told you that he was resistant to treatment? Because then Jim Bob can say, okay, yeah, I was doing that. Instead of you're just making things up. But recognizing that involuntary clients have a lot to lose. How might developing rapport be different between voluntary and involuntary groups? How might it be different? What might you do differently with an involuntary client to help them feel safe versus a voluntary client? Most voluntary clients, when they come into your office, they're a little, hedgy at first, trying to suss you out a little bit. That's normal. But they want to be there. They want to trust you. They want to share and be authentic. Many involuntary clients, it's just the opposite. And if we go in and we push them to divulge everything right away, if we get too intrusive too quickly, they can feel unsafe very quickly. They can feel like you're trying to dig something up on them or you're on their side. But what can you do? And one of the things you can do is ask the client, what can I do to help you feel safer being open with me? And sometimes clients will have something that they offer. Other times they'll be like, I don't know. And that's okay. Both are rational options. Leaving the door open and saying, well, as we talk, as we go through these sessions, if there's a time where you think, yeah, I want to tell you something, but I'm not feeling really comfortable telling you, let me know. And then we can talk about what can be done to help you feel safer. Really putting as much power back into the client's court as we can. Feeling heard is another thing. Developing rapport. A lot of times, clients who are involuntary expect us to have preconceived notions, expect us to not hear them, expect us to pigeonhole them. They come in, they're already defensive. They're already in their fight or flight mind. They're not in their wise mind. And it's hard for them to hear what we have to say. And it's hard for us to effectively hear as much because they're not communicating what their needs, their thoughts, their wants. They're defensive. So what can we do to help them know that we're trying to hear, that we want to hear what they have to say? We're not going to judge them. One of the things I have, clinicians, but also parents do, if they're having a difficult discussion with their child, is instead of coming in, maybe you're going to talk about drugs, instead of coming in and going, I think you're using drugs. Why are you doing that? You know that it's going to destroy your life, blah, 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 blah. Backing off and saying, I want to have a conversation because I found this in your room and I'm concerned. So tell me a little bit about, what's motivating you to use this, or why are you using? I try to avoid the why questions, but sometimes it's just not practical. But instead of saying this is bad and you need to stop, let me hear what's motivating this behavior, because humans don't do things that aren't rewarding, that aren't beneficial. What made you start using? What are the benefits to you of using? Let me hear about what this means to you. And then we can move on from there. But recognizing the benefits and the drawbacks, hearing their perspective, their point of view is so important. So encouraging people to think about, what can I do to help my involuntary clients who feel like they're being judged, who feel like they're, being put through a gauntlet? What can I do to make them feel heard? When people feel safe and heard, and then we start asking them to brainstorm with us how to move toward their rich and meaningful life, then assisted, respected, and empowered fall right in line. But it's something to definitely ponder, because I dare say most of us probably are not perfect at making everybody who comes into our office feel safe, heard, assisted, respected, and empowered. Sometimes we won't be able to do that. And we're going to get to transference, projection, and all that stuff in a minute. But sometimes, based on how we look, based on the agency we work for, based on our tone of voice, who knows? But based on some characteristic about us, clients may come in and automatically freeze up and say, this person's not safe. They don't know us from Adam's house cat, but we remind them of someone or something from their past that wasn't safe, and they just can't get past it. That's okay. That is okay. I'm not going to force them to try to trust me if it's clear that this is going to be an adversarial relationship. That's when I'm going to refer out. I'm going to ask them, what type of therapist might you feel more comfortable with? Do you want someone of a different gender? Do you want someone who speaks your native language if they're not, if English is their second language? What can I do to help you feel safer? People start feeling safe or unsafe with their first contact with us. And that doesn't mean the assessment. That means when they call our office. Think about offices you've called, therapists, doctors, lawyers, whatever. If you talk to a receptionist or somebody and you feel you get put on hold for like 6 minutes and you hear that music playing over and over again, that may make you feel not important to them, if they are harsh with you, if they seem judgy, if maybe you need a first thing in the morning appointment and they get snitty and they're like, well, I don't have a first thing in the morning appointment until 6 weeks from Tuesday. Again, that agency is not making you feel accepted, acknowledged, valued, etc. That's the first indication to people whether an organization is going to be safe and adjust to their needs. Now, yes, I know you can't just magically create appointments that when you don't have staff for them, but it's all in the delivery. If I say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, I really don't have anybody that can meet you at that time. Would you like me to put you on a wait list so I can make an appointment for you 6 weeks from Tuesday, and I can put you on a wait list, and if any of our first thing in the morning appointments cancels, I'll call you. Now, how does that feel more accepting, safer, all that stuff, assistive, than I don't have anything until 6 weeks from now? It's about the delivery. Our online presence and our reviews. If our reviews are abysmal, people are going to feel very uneasy about coming to us. But for some clients, we're the only ball game in town. And I know that was true where I used to work in Florida. We were the only state-funded treatment center. We were the only detox. We were the only crisis stabilization unit in 13 counties. And if people didn't want to come to us, they didn't have another alternative. So if they saw the reviews ahead of time, they could feel anxious about even coming to our facility. And I know I've done that with hospitals. When I've had to go in for a surgery, I've looked and I'm like, this hospital has a 2.3 rating. I'm not really sure that I trust that I'm going to get out of there. Little paranoid, I know. But you get the point. It's important to respond to reviews. It's important to note what your online presence looks like. Is it welcoming? Is it accommodating? Are people able to, for example, contact you via email, or do you force them to call you? I hate calling people. Most people that are younger than me really hate calling people. They would prefer to text or email. So are we being accommodating to the cultural nuances of the clients that we serve? Reception, when people finally get to their appointment, when they walk in, is there the privacy they need? Or are you in a strip mall with glass walls across the front? You know, that's not very private. Goodness. Are they able, if they have a particularly intense session, are they able to go out the back door so they don't have to walk through the lobby if they've been ugly crying for an hour? It's important. I don't want to feel self-conscious when I'm walking out through the lobby. Do we have furniture that is inclusive to the people we serve? If you serve children and you've only got adult furniture and adult magazines, that's not very accommodating. Now, kids don't tend to notice that quite as much, but adults do. If you are serving adults, sometimes they will have children with them. Do you have a play area? Do you have a place where children can sit while you're in your appointment? And obviously, you're not babysitting. But I've had mothers come for treatment, and they've brought their older child to watch after the younger child for whatever reason. And the older child and the younger child stayed in the lobby while I worked with mom. But if I didn't have anything in the lobby especially for the younger child to do, it was a problem. Now, granted, this was before iPhones and everything else, but you get my point. Be punctual. That is one of the easiest ways to communicate to somebody that you respect them, is to be punctual. If you're running 20, 30 minutes late or more, that's disrespectful. Now, occasionally it happens because somebody's in crisis. I get it. But that's when reception needs to call the rest of your appointments for that day and say, hey, Dr. Snipes is running an hour late because she had a crisis. Would you like to push up your appointment or reschedule? That is the kindest, most respectful thing to do, instead of having people show up for their appointment and sit in the lobby for an hour and get angry. The office. Do they have enough privacy? What about the locks? That's a big trigger for a lot of people. If to get back to your office, you have to swipe your key card multiple times and the door locks behind them. For people who've been in prison, who've been in mental health facilities, that can be hugely triggering. And it's important to acknowledge that and make sure that they know that there's a way out. They're not locked in. The door's locked behind us to keep other people from coming in that we don't want. But you can get out anytime you want. And informed consent and confidentiality. That is so important in the first meeting. And like I said, a lot of times I go over it after I've spent 2 or 3 minutes talking to the person. That's the first thing I do or the confidentiality piece, before I even start the assessment. And that is to let them know. These are the guardrails that we have. And not saying that you have to tell me everything, but just so you know what the confidentiality is. Then we'll do the assessment and in the informed consent. Informed consent has to tell them what the treatment is, how long it's supposed to last, what the expected costs are for them, what the risks and benefits are, and what the alternatives to treatment with you are. That's supposed to be in every single informed consent, not just I agree to pay $65 a session or whatever it is. It's important that we learn about the people we serve and what could be trauma triggers for them. Think about, in what ways do these processes we have, from people finding us online to appointment setting, coming into our lobby, waiting for us, getting their appointment, etc. In what ways do these processes contribute to people feeling safe, heard, assisted, respected, and empowered? And how could we do better? My guess is every single person in here could do better in at least one of the areas and at least one of the dimensions. Because again, I don't think we're perfect. I know I'm not. Behaviors to help clients feel safe. ACE, another mnemonic. Ask, collaborate, and empower. I'm hearing an Ice Ice Baby song in my head, and sorry, I got distracted. Who is it? Vanilla Ice. But for those of you who are old enough to remember that, you got to chuckle. The rest of you, you'll just have to look it up on YouTube. Anyhow, ask, what would help them feel safer? What are their concerns about therapy and being there? What are their goals? With people who are involuntarily in treatment, ensure the goals are mutually acceptable. Again, if you don't want to quit using, that's not for me to tell you what you can and cannot do in your life. What I'm here to do is to help you get off probation, which means you've got to stay clean for 4 months, for example. And what do you think? Ask the client, what do you think would or would not help you move toward those goals? Believe it or not, clients often have some ideas. Collaborative communication is essential. Don't lecture or should them. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. If you want to get better, you've got to do this, that, and the... No, that's paternalizing at best and demeaning at worst, I guess. Maybe there's another worse word I could come up with. But we want to collaborate and understand their perspective and identify what they will do. There may be a lot of things they kind of should do, but that's for them to decide. What things could they do and what will they do? Semantic difference, but very important. And empower them with synergy and win-wins. Like I did with my probation clients. I said, okay, you're stuck with me for 16 weeks. How can you make the best use of this time? The state's paying for you to be here, so you're getting essentially free therapy. What is it that you might want to learn? What is it that might be able to be improved in your life? And how can we work on that? And how would it help you move toward what's important? When we communicate, active listening, and this is basic, reflecting what they say, clarifying what we hear, focusing and directing to a particular topic. I remember one of my first supervision sessions. My supervisor listened to my tape and he's like, did you get anywhere in that session? You were off on 16 different offshoots and never followed any route all the way to the end. And I was like, oh, because I let the client direct everything. And they were feeling anxious. They had so much to get out. And so it kind of became a thought dump instead of a constructive conversation. So reflecting, clarifying, focusing on a particular topic. I hear there are these 5 things that are really important to you, and we're going to get to them. Tell me what's the most important thing or the thing that you're most willing to work on today. And let's focus on that. And then I'll write these other 4 down and we will come back to them. And periodically summarizing what the 2 of you have talked about can be really helpful. And it's something you're going to do in your SOAP note, so you might as well get used to doing that. But that way the person can hear, this is what we talked about, this is how we got from point A to point B, and this is what I'm going to be doing between now and the next session. When you're questioning, and I know some of you are going, yeah, this is basic stuff. It is for us because most of us have been in the field for a long time. But for a new a new clinician, it may not be second nature. Make sure our questions are open-ended, especially when we do intakes. We can get very much used to asking closed-ended questions because we have so much to ask and we need to get through it so quickly. It's very structured. But in therapy, we want to ask open-ended questions one at a time. I don't want to provide a litany of questions and then go, okay, go, answer all those questions. Let's start one at a time so I understand your response to this question, and then we go to the next thing. Try to avoid using why when you talk to people because a lot of times that feels confrontational. Why did you do that? What happened that triggered that? I'm wondering in what way that behavior developed for you. How did that help you survive until now? When did you start using? Those are not why questions. Those are and tend to elicit less defensiveness. And explore behavior as adaptation and communication. What people's behaviors communicate. If I start shutting down, that's a behavior. What's that communicating? That I feel threatened, unheard, something. I'm protecting myself. Behavior is also adaptation. We learn to protect ourselves. We learn to do certain behaviors to stay safe in response to certain conditions. I go and get something to eat when I'm hungry. That's an adaptation. The behavior is communicating, I need food, and it's an adaptation that helps me survive. All of our behaviors are that way, even the ones that seem on the surface to be unhelpful or dysfunctional. And try to use alternate perspective questions. If somebody that you really value was in your situation, what would you say to them? Or what would somebody you really value, if they knew about this, what would they think about it? Try to avoid saying, why did you or why didn't you do that? Again, that feels very accusatory. Instead, how did that help you survive? Or tell me about how that developed. What was the course of that? Instead of saying, why won't you do this? Why won't you go to meetings? Why won't you blah? Say, I'm wondering what might be more helpful or effective for you. I want you to stay clean. I feel like it would be helpful for you to have support. One way to get support is through 12-step meetings. However, you don't want to go to 12-step meetings, okay? I'm wondering what might be more helpful or effective to you. So I'm recognizing that there is a reason that somebody doesn't want to do something. Their behavior is communicating something to me. And instead of being aggressive and saying something that may make them feel like I'm trying to change their mind or trying to force them to do it anyway, I'm going to back off and I'm going to say, okay, what could achieve the same goals instead? What other thing could you do? Nonverbals, we want to pay attention to what they're saying and their congruency, the nonverbals with the verbals. Our speech, our rate and volume of speech, and the client's rate and volume of speech. Is it communicating to us that they are being honest and authentic, or is it communicating to us that they think one thing, but they're telling us what they think we want to hear? Do they look guarded? Or are they being transparent? What does their eye contact say? And remember, eye contact is very cultural. But if a client normally makes really good eye contact with you, and in the last session, they were staring at the floor the whole time, that's communication. And we want to potentially ask about that. Very gestalt. Tell me, you're looking away a lot, and I'm wondering what that's about. What is that telling you, or in what way is looking away helping you feel safer? Look at their facial expressions and notice what they're saying on their face, even if it's not coming out their mouth. And you can gently question. If there's an incongruence, say, I hear you saying that this is not a problem, but you're nodding yes the whole time. Anything you want to add? And what's their posture? Are they closed off, turned away, or are they open? Thinking about our own nonverbals, what can we do to help people feel safer and more respected? Including how much or how little eye contact, and paying attention to our facial expressions. I know I have some expressions that, we'll say I have a resting cranky face. That's not what the word my daughter usually uses, but you get my point. And I'm not cranky. I'm just deep in thought. But knowing that I may have a disapproving look when I'm deep in thought is important, that I pay attention to that. And what nonverbals of theirs tell you they don't feel what they're telling you they feel? Now, projection is putting my unacceptable or disowned feelings or thoughts on you. If a person is having romantic feelings towards you, they may say, no, I don't have romantic feelings towards you. You're trying to woo me. It's all these, what's going on with me is a result of your actions. If they want to blame you for being angry, maybe the client feels defensive and angry. They may identify you're the one that's triggering all of this because you're being hostile. They're projecting that feeling onto you and saying, it's not my feeling, it's your feeling, and I'm just reacting to it. If a therapist is listening, but maybe not agreeing enough, or their nonverbals are off, or maybe everything's in sync, but the client feels ashamed, they feel they're judging themselves, they may assume that or project that the therapist is judging them. They're seeing in the therapist what they're feeling about themselves. Same thing with what they perceive as a bored therapist. If the therapist checks their watch, which we do occasionally because we need to know when to call time. Now, most of us have a clock in a convenient place where we can see it. But even if we check it just once, a client who already thinks that they're boring may feel like or assume the therapist thinks the same way. They project that onto the therapist. It's important that we acknowledge how we feel, and then this can become a therapeutic issue about us communicating, well, this is actually how I feel or what I'm thinking. I'm wondering how you feel about yourself. And it needs to be navigated very, very carefully, because that's a lot for a lot of people to accept, that what they dislike in others is what they dislike in themselves. What they judge in others or assume they see in others may be what they feel like they've got in themselves, and they don't like it. Transference is redirecting your feelings from a prior real or fantasy relationship onto the current person. Transference can also involve having feelings towards someone that reminds you of someone in your past. Examples: the critical parent. If the patient expects the therapist, who is now the authority figure, to criticize them, then when the therapist is listening and maybe doesn't have a happy face, the client may perceive that as rejection, because they're seeing in the therapist, they're actually seeing nonverbals that remind them of how their parent acted toward them. A patient who was neglected as a child may begin to feel dependent on the therapist for rescue. Now again, this is that imagined relationship. They had always hoped for somebody that was going to be a stable, secure caregiver. All of a sudden, the therapist is there, and the client may start projecting or transferring, I need to use my words correctly, transferring those feelings onto the therapist, that you are the rescuer, you are the savior that I've been looking for, that I've dreamed of all my life. The patient who reacts with intense, inconsolable rage or abandonment to brief absences may be reacting to abandonment by their primary caregiver or somebody else in their life. It feels, the therapist is off for a certain number of days, has to take a vacation, is off sick, whatever, and the client may feel like they're being abandoned. If the therapist reminds them of their first love, then the way they look, the way they talk, the way they move, whatever, then the client may transfer those feelings of admiration and love onto the therapist, because they're feeling that all over again. And we have to remember that most of us recreate family dynamics and roles in our group, home, or work settings. So thinking about your your work setting, think about who in your work setting represents which family members, just to, notice it. Displacement is the close cousin of transference and projection, displacing known feelings, usually anger, onto a safe target. For example, you can be angry at your anger at your husband may be taken out on your therapist, because it may not be safe to take your anger out on your husband. Or your anger at your boss is taken out on ... fill in the blank. Rapport saboteurs, thinking about how projection, transference, or displacement clouds that relationship and disrupts rapport. That can be an entire discussion in a group supervision session. What does it look like and feel like when you have rapport with a client? What does it look like and feel like when you're losing rapport with a client? A lot of times it's not like that. It's a gradual erosion of rapport. If you had it, and it may erode. Thinking about causes of rapport loss. If you had to do a mandatory report, if you had to charge a no-show fee, if you had to cancel the appointment, even if it's rare, some clients may feel like that is disrespectful and abandoning. And if you're being inattentive, not hearing what they say, you're kind of off in your own world, all of those can start eroding rapport. If you notice rapport is starting to erode, what can you do to get it back? And, obviously changing any behaviors that are causing it is one of them. But knowing and having that conversation with young clinicians is important to recognize that all is not lost. Just like any normal relationship that may hit some bumps, you can rebuild it and come through stronger, but it's important to acknowledge your part. Developing rapport is an essential process that takes place over the first couple of sessions. Maintaining rapport is equally as important. It's not just something you get and you've got forever. Consider prior clients and relationships in which you felt like you had rapport. And consider clients or relationships in which you didn't have rapport. What was different between those two groups? So how can you know if you've got rapport? What does that look like? What is evidence that there's rapport?